Welcome. In Westbridge, every notification carries a story. A simple message can change a life. And sometimes love begins beyond the screen. The neighborhood group chat wakes Westbridge at 2:17 a.m. with a single line of punctuation. Route 9, wedding dress, woman walking, snow, anyone? The alert lands on William Harrison's phone like a small, sharp stone. He reads it twice, feeling the weight of the winter night through the thin glass of his porch window. The same night that used to mean quiet and the soft hum of the night nurse's radio when Sarah was still alive. He should be in bed. Charlie will wake if the ice shifts wrong under the porch swing. But the message makes him move. He throws a coat over his shoulders, though he hates the way it flaps at his knees, and steps into the cold that feels like someone has opened the town's freezer. The headlights from his truck cut a path through drifting snow. Breath fogs and short, surprised bursts. Route 9 is a ribbon of dark between tired fields and shuttered storefronts, a place that, at odd hours, folds people into its loneliness. Will drives slowly, scanning the shoulders, the ditches where a figure might be hunched against the cold. He finds her where the message said, just past the old mill, a smear of lace against white. The hem of the dress drinks the snow. Her shoes are clutched in a gloved hand, each step leaving a lace-edged print that looks impossibly fragile in the road. Headlights make the beadwork on her sleeves wink like stars. He parks and kills the engine, and the sudden silence feels like stepping into an unlit theater between acts. She is standing as if waiting for something. Rescue, return, or maybe a decision she hasn't yet made. He approaches with his palms open. Not too fast. The way he learned to approach a frightened animal. Her face is small and pale beneath a veil of damp hair. At first she doesn't look at him, only at the dark road that seems to swallow the town in both directions. Her eyes have a practiced composure, someone who has rehearsed the part she was meant to play. Then she looks up and sees him, and there is a small, almost apologetic relief like the easing of a held breath. "Are you all right?" he asks. The words are ordinary, the kind he has used 1,000 times as a volunteer for the community watch. She shakes her head, but the motion says more than the word. "I need to get away," she says. Her voice is steady, not hysterical. Tired. Shut down in a way that suggests she has already made many rapid calculations. "I don't have anywhere to go." Will glances at the wedding dress, the way it hangs away from her shoulders, and then at the road that leads back toward town with its rows of sleeping houses. He thinks of the promise he once made to Sarah, whispered into a hospital pillow the night the doctor stopped saying the impossible. Look after the small things, he had told her, meaning the little human cruelties and lonelinesses that didn't make it onto obituaries. It was his way of keeping her alive in the world, not by miraculous cures or grand gestures, but by attention, turning up, making soup, saving a seat at the piano for a neighbor's son who wanted to practice. This is one of those small things. "Come with me," he says. "I'll get you warm." She considers the offer with that same thin composure. "I'll get in," she says finally. Not a thank you. Her fingers are numb. She hands him her shoes as if offering them for safekeeping. He takes them and slides them into the back seat, then opens the passenger door. The dress brushes his palm. Snowflakes cling to the lace like frost on lacework. She gets in, and for the entire drive back, neither of them speaks. The town looks different at night, lamps haloed, windows like eyes with curtains drawn. Will thinks of the last time he drove Sarah down Route 9, the radio playing too loudly to hear the small silences between them. In the hallway of his house, the smell that hits him is the one that has anchored him since the winter after Sarah's death. The subtle musk of old flour, coffee, and the faint soap scent Sarah favored. The house is small and carefully kept, the kind of place where grief has had its own furniture. Folded sweaters in a basket by the radiator, the piano with a sheet of music undone, a vase where once flowers were arranged each week. There is a guest room with a quilt that Sarah's mother gave them the first Christmas. Too many careful stitches to ever throw away. Will runs a hand along the banister, as if mapping the distance of his life in wood grain. He throws another blanket over the woman's shoulders while he sets a kettle on, and when the clatter of the teacup settles, he finally hears more of her. She says her name in parts. "Victoria," she begins, then an almost automatic correction. "Tori." Names feel like currency tonight, something fragile that must be traded and chosen. "Do you have family?" he asks. and he is trying not to be too gentle, not to fill the silence with pity. Her lips tighten for a second. "They'll find me," she says before she can think better of it, sounding like someone who has rehearsed both sides of the conversation. "But I can't go back there." He puts 2 mugs on the kitchen counter, the same place he used to put 2 cups of coffee every morning for Sarah. He remembers the way Sarah used to stand at the counter, the soft way she would tilt her head, the laugh that came like a small breeze. His hands now move with the economy of someone who has learned to give grief a place in the day's work, not to let it run the household. By the time Charlie wakes, sunlight is a wash of pale gold through the curtains. The 8-year-old appears in the doorway with hair tousled and eyes still full of sleep, like a small observant animal. He sizes up the shape of the stranger at the table without judgment. Children don't carry the long inventories of adult caution. "Who is she?" he asks, matter of fact. "This is Tori," Will answers. "She needed somewhere to stay for a night." Charlie approaches as if approaching a new classmate, direct, curious, practical. He examines the dress with the serious appraisal of a child who notices the mismatch of elegance and need. "Do you like pancakes?" he asks, which is Charlie's way of offering friendship. Tori manages a smile that reaches her eyes. She crouches to his height, takes his small hand, and wraps it in both of hers as if memorizing the shape of a child's knuckles. They eat pancakes in comfortable silence, the air thick with steam and the smell of butter. Tori tells Charlie about a job she once had, helping a neighbor with a rooftop garden uptown. Names dropped like clues. She is good with a spatula, and better with a pair of pruning shears. In the kitchen light, with the sound of the kettle and Charlie's tiny earnest questions, she looks younger than her years, but old enough to have known the taste of being told where to belong. Later, she wanders into the backyard and stops in front of the old flower beds. The garden, once Sarah's sanctuary, has been allowed the sort of lapse that grief permits. Beds overrun with last summer's indignant perennials, a birdbath half buried by leaves, and a stand of iris gone to wildings. A tomato stake leans like a tired man. Will watches her become still in a different way now. That energized stillness that comes before a person starts to fix something. "I shouldn't," she says, almost to herself. "I haven't done anything like this." "You could start," Will answers, surprising himself with how readily the words come. "Sarah planted marigolds in the front every year. She used to say they'll keep away the worst mosquitoes and the worst people." His voice cracks like a twig. He doesn't elaborate. There's no need. Grief and humor have been married in this house for years, an odd partnership that keeps the rhythms going. They make a list. Tori kneels in the dirt with her jeans dusted in brown, drawing with a stick as if sketching a small city plan. She talks about soil tests and small hedges that will keep the eye traveling down the path. Will listens, and with each detail she names, companion planting, a place for shade lovers, something inside him that has been folded up begins to smooth out. Gardening becomes a common language, and in that language they build their first real exchange that is not about what was lost, but what could be tended into being. Tori asks if there's a nursery in town. Will knows the one at the edge of Maine, Maggie's greenhouse, runs by a woman named Maggie who hires part-time in spring. He tells Tori the hours and how the work sometimes includes potting plants on the back porch. On a late afternoon walk into town to fetch seeds and potting soil, Tori steps into Maggie's as if entering another room of her life. The glass panes are fogged, the air inside faintly warm with the scent of damp earth and leaves. Maggie is a woman who has the look of someone who has planted more than she has counted, and she angles ahead at Tori as if appraising both soil and soul. "You've got an arm for it," Maggie says after Tori has been showing how to pot a small rosemary plant. "We could use help, at least for Thursday mornings. You'll need to learn the register, closing up on Saturdays." Tori accepts the temp work like someone who has been given a pen after being offered only paper. An odd, ordinary authority. It is not a job that will save her, not a paycheck large enough to buy freedom outright. But it is a beginning, an exchange of labor for a place to stand. It matters. She texts a single word to someone. No, not to the person she fled from. And it feels like a small rebellion. Okay. The days settle into a rhythm that threatens, when seen from the outside, to be ordinary. School drop-offs, nursery mornings dusted with potting soil, afternoons when Charlie and Tori invent a new pancake topping. Will starts leaving the porch light on more often. He finds himself humming to himself while tilling a bed. A memory of a song Sarah used to sing about seasons. How each one comes for a reason. His grief is a low flame that warms some parts of him and consumes others. He is careful not to try and smother it. Instead, he lets it glow, a faithful hearth. There are small stitches of recognition in Tori's manner. How she curls a plant's roots in her hands, the way she notices the old crooked trellis and sees not ruin, but potential. She is not rescued by this work. She is building a foothold. The townspeople notice. Mrs. Calhoun at the library brings over an old pair of gardening gloves. The owner of the bakery offers them a loaf of day-old bread cut thick. These are not gifts of pity. They are transactions of belonging. Will watches this with a careful affection that doesn't rush to label itself. He finds himself being protective in ways that make sense, lending her Sarah's sweater more than once on chilly mornings, an act that is both practical and sacrament in his mind. He is mindful of the promise he made in that hospital bed, not to replace Sarah, but to keep the household a place of care. He thinks of the small seat at the piano reserved for practices, and of Sarah's garden markers, with her neat cursive. The house has room for more care, not to overwrite memory but to add another layer. There are tender, fragile confessions that happen without any speech about moving on. One evening, Tori finds the piano bench and sits, her fingers hovering over keys she doesn't know well. Will walks in and watches the way her hands pause, the faint weathering on her palms. "You play?" he asks. "Not well," she admits. "But people remind me of things when I touch the keys." She plays a few clumsy chords, then laughs at herself in a way that lets Will into something private. A person returning to a body that knows how to make music. Charlie begins to lean on Tori like a plant leans toward a light. He teaches her a secret handshake he invented. She teaches him how to press too hard on the soil and why that matters. Will sees the way Charlie's face brightens when Tori comes home with new seedlings in the morning, how he narrates to school friends the story of the wedding dress, always adding fantastical details, like that Tori arrived with a crown of frost and a talking bouquet. The story spreads through the town, with the soft, florid gossip of people who live in places where everyone's life is a public ledger. At night, Will walks the perimeter of the yard and remembers Sarah with precise tenderness. He recalls their last promise exchange. 2 small vows not recorded by any priest or registrar, but kept like a secret journal. "Take the small kindnesses," Sarah had said, pressing a thumb into the back of his hand. "Promise me you'll answer a late-night knock." He keeps that promise like a litmus test of himself. That is why he stopped on Route 9. Tori, too, has been keeping promises, ones she made to herself before she reached out to anyone else. She has refused to go to the rehearsal dinner. She has torn up wedding plans in private and buried the invitations in a trash can behind a gas station. Only once does she allow herself to name the man she left, as if speaking the name aloud would stake his claim. "Theo Blackstone," she says once, in a moment made careless by sleep and sunlight. The name tastes like a warning. Will hears it, and measures it up with the size of the town. Blackstone is a name that implies acreage and acres of money, and a kind of authority that doesn't understand compromise. He files the fact away without alarm. People with names like that sometimes live like shadows close to the edge of town. Days accumulate, and with them small proofs. Tori learns the bakery's delivery schedule, and gives Charlie an impromptu lesson about how to plant basil seeds in egg cartons. She draws a new garden plan, this one ambitious and practical. Raised beds for tomatoes, a small shaded corner for herbs, a trellis against the fence for climbing beans. Will feels the lift of hope like a draft under a door he had kept closed for too long. The nursery work pays in cash and in trust. Maggie asks questions about her life gently, like someone turning over a seed to check its viability. "You're not from around here?" she asks once, more curious than prying. "From the city," Tori admits. "Sort of. I'm figuring it out." "Good. We need people who are willing to get dirty," Maggie says, and it settles over Tori like an invitation rather than a verdict. As the weeks go by, Will notices other things shifting. The wreath he never took down from the front door after winter. The way the radio in the kitchen plays a station he and Sarah used to laugh about. He begins to leave the porch light on not only for Tori but for the world, a small beacon for anyone needing a place to land. The town responds in small ways. Neighbors begin to nod at Will with an extra measure of warmth, perhaps acknowledging the way he has made space for someone else. There are moments of awkwardness, too. Tori struggles with a checkbook she never had to balance before, and with the tiny humiliations of being dependent. She bristles at charity and refuses the town's offers of help until they become practical exchanges. She will trade a morning at the nursery for a bag of compost, for instance. Will resists the instinct to smooth all her rough edges. He finds pleasure in watching her secure herself, in seeing her insist on paying her share when they go out for old-fashioned lemon pie at the diner. Charlie grows bold enough to ask difficult questions, like where Sarah is now, and whether new people will make his father sad. Will answers him with what he has learned about sorrow, honest and spare. "Sarah is gone," he tells Charlie once as they sit on the back steps watching the clouds like drifts of cotton. "But she loved this house. And she loved you. Nobody can take that away." He watches the boy process the facts with that slow concentration that children have, then begin the messy work of rearranging his internal furniture. One afternoon, as the first buds begin to promise green despite a lingering frost, Tori brings home a bag with a name tag still attached, Blackstone Bridal. She doesn't look at it right away. Instead, she pulls the tag off and tucks it into her coat pocket like contraband. Later, when she is alone in the guest room, she scrolls through her phone and sees a photo she took on the milder days in November, the two of them standing under a skeletal apple tree. Her finger hesitates over a message she has not sent. To her mother, to a lawyer, to no one. She types and deletes several versions of "I am okay" before falling asleep to the quiet hum of the house. Will moves through these days with the awareness of someone walking a narrow ridge. He wants to be present for Tori without assuming responsibility for everything she has fled. He watches her autonomy like something precious, not to be crushed or hidden. He helps where help is asked for. An extra set of hands to lift a heavy pot, the loan of an old pair of gloves, the quiet of a man who knows when not to ask. There is a reciprocity developing between them, small acts that form the scaffolding of trust. Word of Tori's presence spreads. A few townsfolk assume things, some that make him uncomfortable, others that make him longing. Yet the bulk of attention is not prurient. Westbridge is the sort of place that will bring casseroles when someone is sick, and a hand when a roof threatens to cave. One evening, someone knocks at the door and leaves a bouquet in a jar. Marigolds and simple daisies. No note. Will places them in the kitchen where Sarah used to arrange bouquets, and for a moment the house fills with 2 scents layered like memory and possibility. Then, one late afternoon, as Will and Tori stand with their sleeves rolled and their knees damp with soil, a car passes down Route 9 with the slow, deliberate speed of someone who wants to be noticed. They watch the taillights fade, and Tori's hand finds the small plan she has been sketching, a raised bed by the fence that will catch the sun. For the first time since she arrived, she talks about the future beyond next week. "I want to make this place a room for spring," she says, settling the paper on the porch table. Her fingers hover over the inked lines. "Not just for us, for neighbors, for Charlie's school projects. Maybe a place where people can learn." There is a cautious heat in her voice, like the beginning of compost that will one day feed tomatoes. Will looks at her, and hears in her plans a sound he has missed for a long time, the patient, practical voice of partnership. He thinks of Sarah's promise relics scattered through the house, and how one of them was respect, for people's choices, for their small acts of courage. For the first time in many weeks, he glimpses a life that might include another person, not as an erasure, but as an addition. He also feels the old quickness of fear, the line that appears when the past insists on its claim. He has learned how delicately these things balance. That night, Tori sits at the kitchen table and types out a terse message to a number she has hidden under Theo. She does not press send. She looks at the phone as if it might bite. Will, cleaning a pot at the sink, hears the faint click and knows the weight of a name held in the dark. He does not ask whose name it is. Tori does not volunteer it. Instead, she slides a bowl of leftover stew into the fridge and tucks a pair of gardening gloves into her bag. The small practical choices that mean she plans to return in the morning. They have started keeping a pot of coffee on for the early, cold hours because the nursery opens before dawn. It is a simple contract: work, soup, sleep. A week later, Maggie hands Tori her first paycheck, crumpled 20s and a handwritten slip. It is little but honest. Tori breathes like someone finally gets a breath after holding it too long. She tucks the cash into a shoebox under the guest room bed where she keeps other small things. A map with roots crossed out, an old movie ticket stub, a pressed daisy whose petals have browned at the edges. The town continues its ordinary business under the soft, impartial sky. Will tends the spots of the garden he can reach alone and leaves the larger work to days when Tori is present. He finds that his hands remember Sarah's methods. Which soil needs lime, where the sun favors tomatoes. He passes on these memories casually, like the handing over of small tools that allow another person to do the work themselves. But the present has a way of returning to the past with a sound like a car on gravel. One evening, while the three of them wash the last of the dinner plates in a practiced rhythm, Tori's phone vibrates on the counter. She glances at it, and the name on the screen makes the air between them a fraction cooler. She covers the phone with a dish towel, the action as reflexive as hiding an insect under a cup. "Is it?" Will begins, a question as careful as a glove. She shakes her head barely and pulls the phone back. The message is brief and formal, the kind of sentence that carries authority and assumption in equal measure. "Where are you?" Another line follows, then a photo of an invitation she no longer intends to honor. The tone is not angry. It's disappointed in the way a ledger balances itself. Tori sits down heavily at the table, and the chair sounds loud in the kitchen. The house feels suddenly smaller, like a room whose windows are closing. Will studies her face. There is a small, lucid fear there now, one that holds all the faces of someone who has chosen to walk away from a life arranged by someone else's expectations. He imagines a man who has the money to make problems disappear and the temperament to think disappearance is obedience. He does not know the law or the land that men like that own. He only knows how to stand in his own kitchen and keep a promise. Tori meets his eyes and for the first time, tells him something she has been sheltering. "He said I belonged. To him. To the life he planned," she murmurs, and her voice is steady but stripped. "I didn't belong to it." Will reaches across the table and places a hand on top of hers. The gesture is small and unromantic and utterly necessary. Charlie watches from his homework, underlining a school worksheet with the earnestness of someone learning to be brave in tiny increments. Outside, the garden is being swallowed again by dusk, the beds like darkened bowls. "This is still your choice," Will says, a line that has become a creed for him. "Your life belongs to you." She holds his hand like proof. Her phone buzzes again, and she does not look. The number is an insistence. Will hears it as a bell tolling the arrival of the wider world, of people for whom money is the language and where power assumes it can claim lives. He understands that the quiet rhythm they have built on pancakes and seedlings has a fragile border. In the weeks that follow, small acts accumulate into a gentle scaffolding for a life in progress. Tori begins to teach Charlie how to press seeds into soil, demonstrating gently how to cup the dirt and pat it down. Charlie replies with the earnestness only a child can muster. "You should be my mom," he tells her one afternoon, as they water a line of tiny green crowns. Tori laughs, and the sound is something Will files like a new memory. "I can be your friend," she says, and they both know who she means by what she doesn't say. Will puts an old wooden sign into the garden he and Tori have started. Planting. Weekends. Tentative. The sign is both proclamation and a joke. It survives several gusts and an afternoon of rain. The three of them, in the small ritual of planting, begin to become a family by intent rather than by accident. And then, as spring begins to assert itself in earnest, a leather-bound envelope arrives at the house with no postmark, only the embossed seal of a firm from out of town. Will finds it on the kitchen mat, and his stomach tightens in a way that has nothing to do with soil. He slides a finger under the flap and feels the weight of the paper. The contents are a polite request. It asks that Tori return immediately to address matters of property and obligations. The language is formal, heavy with the presumption that one's life is a question to be answered by others. Tori reads it, and for the first time since she fled the dress in the snow, she looks uncertain in a way that is not defiance. She sits down slowly, the envelope quivering against her knees like a captured moth. Will doesn't move to protect her like someone skews toward rescue. He leans forward and folds his hands on the table, a small offering of solidarity. Charlie watches with the seriousness of someone who knows this is one of those moments that could tilt everything. "We can handle it," Will says. It is equal parts vow to her and vow to Sarah, the two commitments folded together like pages in a book he refuses to close. Tori nods, and in the kitchen light they make a plan with the awkwardness of two people who have grown used to improvisation. Call a lawyer, get advice, keep the nursery hours, maybe lock the guest room from the inside when needed. At night, Will cannot sleep. He walks outside and stares at the garden. The beds rise like small promises under the silvered light. He thinks of Sarah's hand, how it rested one last time in his, and of the voice that told him to answer a knock. He thinks of the woman who had sat at his kitchen table and whose face had softened as if to a doorway she had allowed to open. The sound of an engine on Route 9 wakes him at 3 in the morning. It is a car that does not belong to Westbridge as he knows it. It moves with the sort of deliberateness that implies a purpose. The same way a bulldozer moves with the slow certainty of someone who expects compliance. Will grabs his coat without waking Charlie and stares out as it passes, its headlights throwing long fingers across the frost. On the dashboard, someone has left a sticker. Blackstone Holdings. The car's engine purrs as it continues down the road, leaving a ring of sound that lingers like a question. Will stands in his doorway and watches, and in the quiet between engines, a new season of work begins. One that requires not only the patience of planting, but the brazing of bones to stand. He knows, with the unromantic clarity of someone who has loved and lost and learned to live inside the facts, that kindness will not be enough. He will need to be quieter and firmer and more intentional than that. But he also remembers how small acts, blankets, a ride, a bowl of stew, have a way of turning the world sideways enough to let in light. Inside, Charlie is still asleep, a small warmth under the covers. Tori's phone is dark on the kitchen counter like an apple under a cloth. Will steps back from the window and leaves a lamp on in the hallway. He has learned how to make room without occupying other people's decisions. He has also learned that when a person chooses to stay, it is the only proof that matters. In the morning, he will teach Tori how to graft a rosebush. They will plant the first row of tomatoes near the porch, and Charlie will argue for more basil than is reasonable. But tonight, he stands watch for reasons that are both tender and practical, to keep the small kindnesses alive, and to ready himself for the harder work that may follow. If anything, he thinks, looking at the sleeping town, tonight will test whether a life can be built from intention and patience alone. Have you ever had a split-second choice change everything? If this kind of small kindness moves you, tap like. Dawn comes thin and bright, and with it a flurry of tasks, seeds to be labeled, a list of calls to make, a nap. Tori claims on the guest room couch that is less sleep and more the gathering of courage. She wakes with a resolve that is almost visible, the kind that makes a decision sit straighter in a chest. "Let's do the beds today," she says, voice low and firm. "I want to make that corner by the fence a place people can sit." Will nods and fetches the shovel. Charlie races ahead, pockets full of wishful seeds. They work in a rhythm that feels almost ceremonial, turning earth, breaking up clods with the backs of their hands. Maggie stops by with a wheelbarrow of compost, her face worn and pleased. "Good team," she says. "This garden's gonna be the town's best-kept secret." They plant, and as they plant, Will notices the way Tori measures the sun, the way she angles the beds to catch the day like someone reading a map. When she pauses, her hand hovers over the soil, and Will realizes how unsafe she must have felt to leave everything with nothing certain to return to. He thinks how bravery is not always large. Sometimes it's the steady insistence of hands in the dirt. By afternoon they have the first row in. Charlie draws a marker on a shoebox lid, tomatoes in his clumsy letters, and tapes it in place. Tori sits back on her heels, dusting her palms on her jeans, and laughs, sudden and free. She has come full circle from the woman in the wedding dress to someone who can bend earth into something that will bear fruit. They do not know what will come when the neat world of Westbridge collides with the force of outside claim. They do know how to pour coffee, fold a blanket, and measure the angle of sunlight. They have, by doing these small things, built a kind of shelter that is not guaranteed to hold but is honest in its making. As the sun slides down and shadows lengthen, Tori takes off her gloves and finds a folded card tucked into the back of the mailbox. It is the kind of note townspeople pass, Too small for envelopes, too direct for letters. The handwriting is precise, and this time it is not a neighbor. The card reads, simply, "We should talk." No signature. The skin at the back of Tori's neck prickles as if with cold. She stares at the card for a long time, then slides it into her pocket with the same careful motion with which she had hid the wedding tag weeks before. Will watches her, feeling the old promises and the new ones press against each other like two hands trying to occupy the same space. He has no illusions about tidy endings. He knows the work ahead will ask for more than gestures. But if the garden can teach anything, it's that the long, steady tending matters. Roots must be coaxed, then left to find their own way. The sun slides away. Lights come on in windows across Westbridge like low, patient stars. Inside, the refrigerator door is crowded with Charlie's drawings. One of them, a crude portrait of the three of them under a heart-shaped sun, labeled, "Our Home." Will presses his thumb to the magnet holding the picture, feeling the little ridges of Charlie's handwriting. It is an artifact of the life they are beginning to stitch together, messy and true. He clears off the table, the envelope and the card folded into a safe place where they can be addressed when necessary. There are practical calls to place, but for a few hours the kitchen is a sanctuary of simmering soup and the scent of basil. Tori brings the guest room quilt down and folds it into the chair like an offering. Charlie tucks his drawings into a stack and announces that tomorrow he will start a vegetable chart to track the tomatoes. Outside, Route 9 lies quiet, but the memory of lights that moved like intentions lingers. Will goes to the window and sees, far off, a car pull into the end of a gravel drive. A silhouette that could be any car, could belong to anyone. He cannot tell from this distance whose it is. He does not leap to assumptions. He watches the human tendency to hope as much as he watches the human tendency to fear. He has learned to stand in the middle of both. He thinks of Sarah and her exacting wild heart, the way she tended her roses with a sort of holy impatience. And he promises himself again to honor what has been, while making room for what might be. When the nights are long and a neighborhood message cuts through sleep, answers must be simple and steady. Tonight, he has answered, and now the town is part of that story. They have offered Tori a workbench and a place at the table. She has taken both with caution and with hunger. At the end of the day, they have what gardeners call a first light. The brief shining at the beginning of growth, when everything is still possible and nothing is yet decided. The beds are marked, the seeds are sown, and the refrigerator holds a child's drawing that offers a kind of proof. Someone chose them. The rest, Will knows, will require patience, courage, and a willingness to tend, even when storms come. Night comes again, and with it an uneasy silence. Tori's phone vibrates once more on the counter, its screen bright in the dark kitchen. She looks at it and steadies herself as if about to cross a small bridge. Will stands beside her but does not reach for the device. He has learned that the rightness of support can be the simple act of watching someone choose. She unlocks the phone and reads. The message is short and controlled. We have come for what is ours. There is an attached location pin and a time. There is a wet, metallic clarity to the message that makes Tori's hands go cold even as the sun warms the kitchen. We have come for what is ours. The pin drops unhelpfully precise, a map thumbtacked onto the small town like a summons. Will watches her face as if reading soil for moisture. It darkens in the same places fear sits. He reaches for her without theatrics, his palm on the back of her wrist, a steadying touch that says, I am here. They have a plan, the sort you grows in the hushed minutes between panic and action. Call the lawyer Will knows from town meetings, ring Maggie, make a list of who can come sit on the porch. Will's hands move with the economy of habit, fetching a jacket, gathering Charlie's homework, shoving extra coats into a pile by the door. He tells nobody to be brave. Courage is a private instruction that arrives as a decision. Tori breathes and calls a number she'd saved under counsel, Tom. Tom Alvarez is larger in person than on the phone, his office smelling faintly of old books and overused coffee. He's not a man to promise miracles. Contracts, estates, marriage settlements, yeah, those come with fine print, he says. But his voice carries the practical comfort of someone who knows procedural steps. He suggests a few immediate things. Document the message by screenshot. Do not delete anything. Request the firm to put their intentions in writing via the envelope they earlier received. And, most importantly, avoid a rash exchange at the door if the other party arrives first. He also advises vigilance. People with money make small storms. They think storms get response. They rarely plan for neighbors. Will takes the advice like he takes compost, accepting the components that help the work. He does not want to make law the center of the fight, but he does want Tori to have a floor under her feet. He hears Tom's words and arranges a meeting for that afternoon. Meanwhile, word moves through Westbridge in the gentle thrum of someone shaking down a bag of seeds. Maggie straps on her apron and tells Will she will bring extra hands. Mrs. Calhoun says she will gather neighbors for a sit-in. The bakery owner offers to keep a pot of coffee warm on the porch. The town is small enough that people can reroute entire Saturdays if someone needs a place to stand. Theo arrives 2 hours before the lawyer does. Glass and steel progressing along Route 9 like an announcement. He steps out of a black car with the kind of precise movement practiced by men whose lives are choreographed by other hands. He wears a coat that looks designed by committee. His gloves match his impatience. He is not alone. An assistant stands discreetly a few yards back, a phone always in hand. Not a threatening number of bodies, but enough to let you know that his world can mobilize convenience. He rings the bell with the casual certainty of a man used to doors opening on command. Will answers wearing his work jeans and a face that does not give away much. He has learned that anger looks more useful on the inside. The porch is a narrow line between a private life and public expectation. On it stand two people who will test the edges of both. "Mr. Harrison," Theo begins, his voice the kind used to smooth paper into compliance. He steps forward with the practiced distance of someone who knows etiquette and uses it to claim closeness. "Victoria, Tori, belong to my family's arrangements. We expect her return." Will lets the word "belonged" land. It is the wrong word for a human being, but men like Theo think ownership can be exercised with language. "She belongs to herself," Will replies, simply. His voice is low, not theatrical. He has a way of speaking that makes sentences feel like tools, useful and direct. Theo's smile thins, not a curve, but a calculation. This is nonsense. This is impulsive. There are obligations, contracts, reputations, things that bind people in ways that matter. Tori steps out from behind Will's shoulder, hands clenched into gloves she has not yet taken off. She has thought of the ways money can claim a life, through threats, through envelopes that perfume decisions, through the language of duty. She does not let him finish his sentence. "Obligations don't own people," she says. Her voice is steadier than she expected. "You made a life plan that included me. I chose not to be a part of it." Theo's eyes flick to the kitchen, to the picture magnets clustered on the fridge, to Charlie's drawing scrawled with a kooky sun. "This is sentimental," he says, and the word dismisses everything the kitchen has built. "You are entitled to a mistake. We can fix this." "Fix?" Tori says. "Nothing to fix. I wasn't broken, Theo. I was contained." The word comes out sharp. It has the clean edge of one reclaimed from a drawer. Theo's jaw tightens in a way that reveals the strain behind his polished face. "You left," he says. "You abandoned your responsibilities." "I left your plans," she answers. "I didn't abandon my life." Neighbors gather in a loose ring by the mailbox. They appear first as small nodes, Maggie with soil on her hands, Mr. Dawes from the hardware store with a cup of coffee, Mrs. Calhoun with a stern look that has softened into care. Their presence is not performative. It is the way a town says it will not be used as a prop in someone's display. The line they form is unspoken, a human hedge that keeps the private safe from certain kinds of power. Tom Alvarez arrives and stands beside Will like a calm piece of furniture. He holds a folder of papers in a practical hand. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," he says, and his tone implies the law will not be a spectacle. Theo bristles at the suggestion that legal constraint could limit him. He seems used to making decisions with money, and then expecting the world to follow like an echo. "Mrs. Blackstone sends her regrets," Theo says, and it reads as a statement of family protocol. "She would prefer discretion." "Discretion?" Tori laughs, and the sound is magnetic because there is nothing mocking in it. Only the honest iron of someone who has refused to be the quiet end of someone else's plan. This isn't discretion, Theo. It's a public life. I will not go back because of a sealed envelope. He tries a different tact, pity, then promises. He conjures pictures of landscape charity days, of piloted dinners. He offers travel, money, an apology dressed like a leash. Each sentence rings emptier than the last. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted, Tori says. I don't want apologies sewn onto my wrist like a ribbon. I want to live. There is a moment, thin, sharp, and deeply human, when the world seems to condense around that word. Will steps forward then, not to fling a punch or to be a hero, but to locate a boundary. She's our neighbor now, he says, and the sentence holds the weight of the town's small code. You look after your people. You can take this to the right channels, handle it with counsel, but you will not drag her back from our porch. Theo's expression collapses briefly into something pained and petulant. For a second, you can see how the world has been arranged for him like rooms in a house, and how disobedience is a kind of betrayal. This is ridiculous, he says at last. You and your local sympathizers will not make this disappear. No, says Tom. But the law will if you try to claim a woman like property. And if you threaten or attempt coercion, the town will make sure there is a record of it. The argument is not theatrical. It is a sequence of practical moves born from restraint and civic muscle. Theo, sensing that the stage is crowded, and that his theatrics will not produce the result he desires, glances toward his assistant. He recalculates. He understands that taking the fight public will cost him more than a private reclamation. He has the means to continue, but for the day he can accept a withdrawal. He gives Tori one last look, one that tries to measure whether she has regret, and then, like a man crossing a field to the edge of his plan, he turns and walks to his car. The engine hums and is gone before the air cools. For a long minute the town stands quietly, as if waiting to see if the silence will become a threat again. It does not. Instead, people begin to move in small, solid increments. Maggie offers Tori an apron. Mrs. Calhoun brings a thermos of tea. A neighbor leaves a pair of gardening boots on the mat. When the door clicks softly shut, something that had been held taut in the house gives. Tori slides down the kitchen wall until she is sitting on the floor, knees up, head resting heavy in her hands. Will sits beside her. He does not put a hand on her head, or tell her the things books say. It is an action he has resisted because such words often gloss over the real. Instead, he sweeps a hand over the back of Charlie's messy hair when the boy wanders in to see what is happening. We're okay, he says. It is not a ferocious claim. It is simply true in the small, necessary sense. The weeks that follow are a test of patience more than they are a battle. There are letters that require answers, questions about accounts and belongings that need timing and care. Theo sends a formal letter asking for a meeting. Tom advises delaying and responding only with counsel present. There are whispers at the diner, a polite curiosity that sometimes tips into judgment, but mostly the town returns to its rhythms and the garden grows. Tori finds herself awoken at odd hours by the residue of fear, an adrenaline that leaves her hollow and wanting. She becomes guarded with certain conversations, declining calls and refusing to click on the name Theo if it appears. Yet she also starts to build a ledger of small wins. The first paycheck saved in an envelope marked seed money. The first basil harvest that was plentiful enough to give away to an elderly neighbor. She plants things with the deliberate slowness of someone who understands that time is a patient ally. Will watches her from the ridge of domestic life, the way she ties back her hair when the sun is high, how she is taken to humming low and private tunes on the porch while she repots seedlings. He notices, too, a new tendency. His hand will rest on the small of her back when she leans over a bed. It is an old-fashioned protective gesture, but with a different meaning now. Not to control, but to be present. He thinks often of Sarah, of the way she would tape seed packets to a window like small promises. He feels the awkwardness of loving a present without the fear of declaring it a replacement. Love, in his experience, is less the erasure of a memory than its companion. One evening, after a long day at the nursery and a sandwich from the bakery, they sit on the back step with Charlie between them, legs swinging, looking at the beds. The first radishes have broken the surface like proof. The air carries a green, damp smell that makes promises feel like breath. "Do you ever worry?" Tori asks, eyes on the little crowns of leaves. That I'll become the person I'm trying not to be? That I'll slip back into someone else's outline? Will considers his answer. Grief taught him honesty. He has seen the way people return to old templates if no one ever remeasures the fit. I worry, he admits, but I worry in ways that include you, not in ways that try to fix you. That's what I've learned from losing Sarah. The best thing you can do for someone is to keep the edges clear enough so they can be themselves. Tori watches his face. There is a moment where fear and hope collide and make something new. I want to be chosen, she says at last. Not because I fit a plan, but because someone chooses the messy person I am. Will puts his hand over hers, then over the little warm knuckles of Charlie's. Then choose us, he says, and the phrase is softer than a proposal, and more binding because it is not about titles. Choose this. Not because it erases anything, but because you make the choice to stay and to grow. She studies him, measuring the sincerity in the way his jaw moves, the small precision of his eyes. He is not asking her to promise forever in a formality. He is offering company in the slow business of living. Tori lets out a breath that sounds like the beginning of laughter and the quiet of someone stepping across a threshold. I choose to try, she says. The words are simple, and for a while they are enough. There are no dramatic declarations of marriage or swift resolutions. Their relationship blossoms in a different register, an accumulation of choices and daily labor. Tori continues her shifts at Maggie's where her hands move confidently among seedlings and dusty labels. She volunteers to teach a Saturday gardening class for kids, which Charlie attends like an apprentice. Will takes on more nights at the community center, delivering hot meals. Charlie's school projects are often about pollinators or compost, and neighbors start asking for seedlings and small lessons. The garden becomes, slowly, a place where the town's edges no longer point outward, but wrap in. Yet the past is not entirely placated. Theo's family presses the issue in the background with low-level legal motions. Envelopes arrive with lawyerly insistence. Tom handles them with a steady hand, filing responses that postpone dramatic claims. The town's watchful presence matters more than any paperwork. They are a chorus of witness. People notice when one household in a small town rearranges itself. They notice also when someone stands and says, plainly, that they belong to themselves. One night, months after the wedding dress was left at the roadside, Theo returns to Westbridge. He pulls up at dusk in a smaller car this time, alone. There is a different look on him now. Less swagger, more fatigue. He walks to the edge of the garden and looks at the tomato stakes with something that seems like calculation. Tori is there, bent over a vine, her hands in soil that has become a kind of autobiography. She straightens at his approach, but she does not hurry. Theo says little at first. He watches her the way one watches an object one has lost but once owned. For a moment, there is a danger of his old script returning, of persuasive apologies and the kind of smoothed-over regret that buys space without real change. Instead, he surprises both of them by saying quietly, "I didn't understand." Tori wipes her hands on her jeans. Understand what? That people are not arrangements, he says. That the life I designed wasn't yours to accept or reject. I thought. He stops, because whatever arrogance had been his anchor has been softened by the humility of seeing a life he cannot compose. I'm sorry, Victoria, if that means anything. The apology is not redemptive. It does not erase the past, but it is a small, human thing. An admission that sometimes the most powerful kind of wealth is the capacity to change one's mind. Tori nods, not soft with a cinematic forgiveness, but with a practical acceptance that people can be shifted. Theo lingers for a minute longer, then steps back and walks away. He does not look back down Route 9 the way a man who had once owned a dream might. The car vanishes. The act is not victory for anyone. It is simply a retraction of pursuit. The real climax between Will and Tori comes not in confrontation with an ex-fiancé, but in a kitchen at midnight, with the window fogged and a kettle sighing on the stove. There is no dramatic music, only the small, intimate sound of someone putting their life into words. I used to be afraid of this house, of what giving it to someone might mean, Will says. He is honest about his history, how the house was a shrine to memory and how allowing love back in felt like an act of disloyalty. He tells her about the nights he opened the piano to keep a measure of noise in the room, and how sometimes he would play the same song and then stop, mid-line. I thought loving someone again would erase Sarah, but it doesn't. It sits next to it. There's enough room to keep being sad and to choose joy. Tori listens, tears pooling in a way that surprises her. It is not grief, she mourns. It is the recognition of the complexity of loving a man who has loved before. I was afraid I'd become someone obedient again, she confesses. That I'd settle into someone else's shape without realizing it. You won't, Will replies, and his voice has the clasp of truth. Because I won't let you. I won't be the kind of man who arranges. I will be the kind who asks and listens and shows up. If that's not what you want, I will step back. But if you choose to keep tending with me, I promise to tend the things that matter to you. She takes a breath, and the decision is as much practical as romantic, a choice to carve a life from the ordinary. I choose to tend, she says, and it is not a surrender, but an agreement. They do not marry in a church under fanfare. There is no sudden legal victory recorded in the paper. Instead, they plant a rose bush together in the place nearest the porch, two people with muddy sleeves and a kid who wants to put a ribbon on everything. Charlie drives a stake into the ground that reads tomatoes in blocky letters, and for a moment the world shrinks around hands that are busy. The garden becomes the emblem of their life. Less a tidy plot and more a testament to patience. The raised beds swell with beans that lean on bamboo poles, marigolds that promise to keep pests at bay, and a small patch where Charlie insists on planting sunflowers that will be taller than both adults by July. Tori's hands grow knuckled not from glamour, but from the good small labor of pulling weeds and checking for blight. She develops a confidence that has nothing to do with a last name and everything to do with the steady accrual of skills. Neighbors come on Saturdays to learn and to help. The library hosts a workshop, and the town paper runs a small piece about the community plot that turned into a